One of the top voices from India's infrastructure sector, Vinayak Chatterjee, managing trustee and founder of Infra Vision Foundation, he joins us. Vinayak, welcome. Your takeaway on whether you think this budget has done enough to boost growth and the kind of ripple effect you think that this tax benefits that have been given to the middle class could potentially have on India's consumption story.
Probably the most relevant question for this budget, year after year when the budget is presented, the big question asked is how much has the allocations for the infrastructure sector been increased? Because for the last 10 years, the storyline, the economic mantra, the governing economic philosophy has been that infrastructure outlays will pump prime economic growth. And the government has also put out statistics to say that 1 rupee spent on infrastructure results in 3 rupees of GDP growth, etc., etc. So in the past many years, we have seen budgets increase allocations for the infra sector by 30%, 30%. You will remember these years, last 2-3 years ago, 5 lakh became 7.5, 7.5 became 10. Now, wonder of wonders, this year, actually, the allocation for infrastructure, believe it or not, is just flat. It's the same as last year. I have the figures before me. The allocation for the infra sector last year, CAPEX, was 11.1 lakh crores. And this year, it is 11.2 lakh crores. So it's flat. There has been no increase in the infrastructure sector allocation worth talking about. However, there is a point of view that the full budget allocation for last year has not been fully utilized because of the slowdown in CAPEX, etc., etc. And out of the 11.1, only 10.2 has been actually utilized. So therefore, if you take the base as actual expenditure expected this year at 10.2 and the budget provision of 11.2, then you could argue that it's a 10% increase. But actually, budget allocation to budget allocation last year to this year is the same. So it is one of the first times in living memory that the budget allocation for infrastructure sector is as close to zero increase as possible. Having said it, it need not necessarily be viewed as a negative, because what it achieves is the FM has done her very, very difficult balancing act. She has cut infra outlays, but she has preserved fiscal discipline, which she has brought the fiscal deficit down to 4.4%. So this is the result of the balancing act. And to the credit of the government in structuring this year's budget, there has been a slew of initiatives for different segments of infrastructure, whether it is maritime or whether it is regional connectivity, etc. And I personally have now picked up from her budget speech 6 elements where she is pressing the button on getting private CAPEX back again. For example, the Urban Challenge Fund mandates PPP. NABFID is giving a credit enhancement for loans taken by private sector for infra investments. She has asked all infra ministries to prepare a 3-year roadmap to prepare a pipeline of PPP projects. The asset monetization pipeline is expected to garner 10 lakh crores in the years ahead. She has extended the sunset clause of sovereign wealth funds and the pension funds, which was expiring on 31st March 2025 for the next 5 years. And finally, she has announced a very important committee to oversee the functioning of independent regulatory authority, non-financial regulatory authorities, which by and large includes a large number of infrastructure regulatory authorities, and I suspect that will also be to, in a sense, look at ways of increasing private capital participation. So that's my storyline. Back to you.
No, but you are shocked that infra spending hasn't been increased. The fact is that last year we couldn't spend the money which was allocated in the budget for various reasons, elections and the ability of states to spend. So therefore, why is that a bad thing? I mean, it's better to actually spend out the amount that's been allocated rather than allocate and not be able to spend.
Look, the big question is, what has suddenly happened to our execution capacity that when the government makes the money available, we can't spend it? It is very, very difficult to think of a country where we are looking at removing poverty, where we are looking at removing standards, and we are looking at it with the governing mantra of CAPEX in infra, pump priming growth, and then you turn around and say, I have the money, but I can't spend it. I mean, is that a rational economic argument? I would take this lack of spending very, very seriously And I would question that if
Let's
increasing
Islam
CAPEX
from the
is
BJP
not
respond to this.
anymore...
Vinayak Chatterjee questioning very seriously the inability of the central and state governments to spend on public infrastructure despite having allocated funds for this. Let Zafar Islam respond to Vinayak Chatterjee.
Thank you, Rahul. First of all, before I respond to Mr. Vinayak Chatterjee, I would also like to respond to some of the opposition leaders I've heard. I think it is their job to criticize every single budget, whether it's 2014 budget or 2025 budget. You will always see their criticism. So even if you bring word to their tweet, they will keep criticizing the government. So it's perfectly all right. However, from that, I think it is very important to understand that the finance minister has a very difficult job, very complex job. She has to balance every budget. She cannot accede to requests coming from different quarters. She has to balance. Sometimes she has given large allocation for capital expenditure, as Mr. Vinayak Chatterjee said. Last 3 years, consistently there was a consistent growth on capital expenditure. But this year, particularly, will be focused on execution, because budgetary allocation is one thing, but as he rightly said, the revised budget, revised estimate suggests that the entire money which was allocated has not been spent. So focus will be on execution, and execution is something which is important for multiplier which we want to have in the GDP. Because if railways, the allocation which has been made, large allocation has been made for railways, for roads, and these infrastructure investment definitely give 3 to 4, 5 rupees for every rupee spent in the multiplier, as a multiplier effect for the GDP, particularly if you take backward integration and for integration into act.
But Mr. Zafar Islam,
But
is
let
that,
me tell you, two
is that in a
things,
sense a shift
let me
in
just
strategy? No, Mr. Zafar Islam, is there a shift in strategy, a conscious shift in strategy, particularly when in this budget it appears that the government has discovered the middle class, or the middle class believes that the government has finally listened to it, and thereby you hope that the middle class consumer now and private investment, you hope, will take the economy forward. Not government capital expenditure, but this time it's the middle class consumer and hopefully private investment which will take the economy forward.
Rajdeep, you have to see budget in totality. Government has definitely taken reform measures to boost growth, particularly tax reforms, power sector reforms, urban development reforms. They have taken many measures to boost the economy. Definitely consumption is one concern which every single economist was talking about, and they were all saying that why don't you give money at the hands of people so that they can spend. Now, same people who were criticizing the budget, had we not considered this request, perhaps they would have criticized nothing is for the middle class. When everything has been, the entire coffer has been opened for the middle class, see, people were on the street were expecting that 10 lakh, relief will be up to 10 lakh. Now the government has gone beyond their expectation, beyond everyone's expectation on the street to 12 lakh. And there's something commendable, everybody is happy. I have seen many reports. Nobody is criticizing the government because they know that the consumption is something which is important for growth, and middle class needs that kind of additional comfort, which has been provided by the Honorable Finance Minister, Honorable Prime Minister. I think compliment